Okay, so just for clarification, these are all your personal opinions and you do not speak for your company slash corporation.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Could you introduce yourself, your role in your industry, and your area of expertise?
Okay, so my name is Dr. Erika Lorenzana del Villar, and I am currently the Vice President of Equity at HealthPoint in Seattle, Washington. It's a network of community health organizations that delivers holistic healthcare to vulnerable and low-income communities. And um, my role really is within the scope of diversity, equity, and inclusion within the organization, in the workplace, but also in terms of health equity in the populations that we serve. So my area of expertise is currently diversity, equity, and inclusion as a practice and in strategic thinking around DEI. But I am a sociologist and political scientist by training.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And how long have you been in your field?
In my field. So I guess strictly in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion as a practice in the field, I have been here for about 5 or 6 years, almost 6 years now, right?
Wow.
But in sociology and political science, longer than that, probably close to 20 years now, right? In different roles and capacities, different organizations as well. Mhm.
Yes. Uh, and over that period of time, how have you seen AI impact your work?
Wow. So let's see. I've been a professional, right, for I would say again 20 years now or so. AI has really made a strong impact over the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years in my career.
Mhm.
And I think that follows the way that AI has developed really exponentially over the past 5 to 10 years, really. I mean, it's been there, right? We've had AI for a while, in terms of the technology we're using, but in terms of daily life, daily work, in schools, even in healthcare where I am now, and in just the way we do things, right? AI is just front and center. So it has significantly impacted daily work, I would say, in general, in terms of how fast we are able to produce things, how it has impacted just the time and the resources that it needs to be efficient with our work. But it also has impacted us in thinking about the rules, parameters, and the ethics of how we use that tool, right? Because it is so powerful. Mhm.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about that
Yeah.
last time.
Yes.
So, in your own words, how would you define generative AI?
So generative AI is a tool that generates, right, by its very word, right, answers or insights or ideas in a very cohesive form in response to a question or a prompt, right? So it allows us to generate a certain written or visual product based on the information that is um, provided to it, right? So it generates, it's not really necessarily original work, but it is a tool that, given the information that is entered into that system, provides us or supplies us with a product or an output based on our instructions or our prompts. So
Mhm. And how is this utilized in your industry?
so for us, my industry right now is healthcare. And for us, it is used a lot or has been used over the past couple of years, really, by physicians and clinicians who really are who have daily encounters with patients. We call our appointment, if a doctor's appointment is called on our end, an encounter. So a patient encounter is when a doctor, a nurse, a medical assistant has an interaction or encounter with the patient, and AI has been loosely used already for charting, right? So in those spaces, if you've ever been to a doctor, you notice a doctor, typing away when
Yes.
they're interviewing you. They are entering that data about your health record into a system called an electronic health record. And more often than not, right, it's very difficult to chart all the information at the same time while giving quality care, right? So sometimes they keep on typing, but there's a trade-off where you are not really interacting on a very personal level with the patient. So what AI tools have been helping doctors do better is charting the data of the patient. So there are dictation tools, for instance, right, that allow the system to transcribe that interaction so that the doctor does not need to type all the notes, right? And then uh, at the end of the day, when the doctor needs to close that chart, right, all they have to do is really like revise a little bit and tweak a little bit and clarify, but basically all the notes are there. So these AI technologies have really made the time spent of physicians on charting um, lesser, right? And they become more effective. It's possible now to have patient encounters that are more personal or more focused on the patient rather than on charting, right? Now the danger there, right, is or the risk is with AI, the information of the patient is entered into a tool, right? Where, of course, all the information is now in this maybe third-party tool, even not an internal tool to the hospital, where private information and health information or health records of the patient are now given to this generative AI tool in violation of, let's say, certain laws on health record privacy, right? So that's something that at least healthcare is grappling with, right? Because generative AI really depends on the information you provide it. But then in healthcare, the information contains private information and health records of patients that cannot be divulged externally, right? So that's kind of like the challenge in the
I think
industry.
last time we
Mhm.
talked about there are specific models of AI that are compliant
Yes.
with these laws.
Yes, exactly. And one of them is Epic. I may have mentioned that to you maybe
Yes.
the last time. Yeah. Right. And so HealthPoint literally just transitioned to Epic October 1st, right? And
Oh,
it has changed our workflows, changed the way we record information. All the layers of protection in terms of HIPAA compliance, right? The tool has made it easy for us to gather the data and protect the data. And Epic, it's just like Microsoft, right, in terms of what it does. But Epic really focuses on electronic health records, right, in terms of their system, and it's really leveraging AI in how it houses the data and how it shares the data across health centers. So if you can imagine, Epic, what the power of Epic is that it's not only the data of, let's say, HealthPoint, our organization, but let's say Swedish or Overlake, if they have Epic as well and they have my chart, all of that information is connected. So if I want to, for example, refer a patient to Overlake or Swedish, they immediately are able to access the data as well. And that really, really needs a, a tight layer of protection and AI. And again, I don't know how they do it on the back end, but really leveraging AI to do that work and then to gather, at least in my work, population health data,
mhm.
right? Patient demographics, health outcomes. And so now I am able to, for example, if I need to look at um, health outcomes with regards to diabetes, for instance, with the Black community in Tukwila, which is one of our sites, versus Auburn, I can go into um, one of the Epic reporting. There's a kind of like a feature for Epic reporting, and I immediately efficiently, right, just filter based on whatever I want to the query I want, and it pops up the data that I need, right? So even my work has become more efficient in terms of just generating reports and data around health equity in general.
So
Yeah.
that's actually the next question. How do
Mm.
you currently use AI tools? Because we've talked about how it is used in general with
Mm-hmm.
doctors and such, but how do you personally use it?
Yeah, so for me, again, my work now has become more immersed in that health equity space. And when we say health equity, it's really tracking health outcomes that can be disaggregated based on demographic criteria, whether it be race, age, class, ability, geography, location, right? And so part of my work is working with our population health team to track that data, to generate reports, because our healthcare organization is accountable to different partners, whether it be the federal, state, or local governments, public health. Sometimes we're part of um, learning collaboratives, we call it, where we receive certain grants for health equity, and then we have to report if the targets are met in terms of
Yes.
decreasing disparities, right? So we have to report on those. So for me, prior to our tool right now, we've already been using Power BI, right? And we had like a catalyst, what we call it internally. Um, it was it's something that I really do in terms of generating reports and tracking data on health equity outcomes. So AI has helped me with that particular task of tracking health outcomes to ensure that there is equity in the health outcomes of our patients. Now with a more powerful tool, what would take me, let's say, a week to do, right, on and off, right? I can just basically do in an hour, right? And so the speed at which I'm able to do it and the accuracy with which I'm able to do it, how I'm able to play around with the data, so so to speak, and generate all the even the visuals, right? The graphs that instantly, if
Yeah.
I'm using this, and for example, if I'm using Power BI, there's Copilot over there, and then a certain graph is not available based on what I generate in terms of my report, I use Copilot and say, can you present this data in tabular form and disaggregate by X, Y, and Z, right? Then Copilot will do it for me, right? And I just have to tweak it a little bit.
Mm.
But I no longer have to go into Excel and generate the table and it really um, increases my bandwidth, right, for other things in terms of strategy work, and saves me a lot of time. Uh, you know, the time that I would take before like is greatly reduced by it. So that's how I use it personally in terms of um, just data reporting and analysis around health equity and health outcomes, but also even in writing, right? I actively use ChatGPT, even like the easiest tool, right? When I need to write, let's say, messages or just like anything that I need to write, even emails, right? So I don't ask ChatGPT to do it from scratch, right? I have drafts, I have a bullet points, and I want to do this, but I don't have enough time to do a well-crafted email because I have so many other things to do, strategically. And so I just feed that into ChatGPT, with prompts and everything, and it generates now two options, right? Do you want to go with option one or option two?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So again, it really brings down the time that I usually took even in writing, um, because it helps me now not just write, but it helps me frame my thoughts, right? I have all these ideas, and it's a partner for me in my work,
Yes.
and it's a tool. It's not something I depend on to do my work, but it's like having literally like an assistant beside me to help me think through it and process. Yeah.
So, what I'm gathering with how you talked about how it's used in healthcare and how you use it, AI takes on the more mechanical tasks of your
Yeah.
work and lets you do the human part, the
Yeah.
ideas, the interacting with other people. That
Yes,
actually allowed me
exactly.
to put it into words. That's really nice.
No, no, but you even articulated it more clearly, I think. It's really AI technology as a tool to become more efficient in the administrative processes and the delivery of the services, right? And we are still the brain. The ideas still come from us. It is just a partner that I wouldn't say a crutch, right? But as you said, it's just the human part is still us. I mean, that's something that in all the AI tools that I've encountered, right, it does help a lot, but the human touch, the tone that I want, in terms of that email is still something that has to come from me because it generates a well-written paragraph, for instance, but then I say, that's not me. That's not my voice, right? So I need to kind of take it apart and tweak it so that when people read it, oh, okay, this is still Erika speaking, right? These are her ideas
Yes.
because it's not perfect. Even if I say use a casual tone in writing this, right? It doesn't get me. So I don't think it's a replacement for human beings doing the ideating and the writing,
Okay.
per se.
So the next question was how does it impact your efficiency and creativity? But I think we touched on both of them because it
Mm-hmm,
seems
yeah.
your efficiency also helps enable you to be creative. Is
Yes, exactly. So once I have that, I would say polished, right, draft based on my bullet points, now it allows me to take that and elevate it, right, into being a more creative, um, piece of writing. But I think if I can add to that, right, and I've been talking about this with my daughter and even my husband, right, because I think I come from a generation where we did not have these tools. And it was such a practice for us in school, for instance, to just do everything from scratch. And so
yeah.
the skill set that we have to compose original work, right? And then having to edit that over and over again, I think is that critical thinking piece that, and I'm not saying it's not present here, right? But for us, I immediately saw AI as a tool or as a partner because it was so ingrained in me that I could do this on my own. But now that I realize that, oh, it makes me more efficient, I'd have more time to sleep, now that I'm older, I have more time to like have dinner, I'm going to use this tool to help me become more efficient at what I do. It doesn't take away from my creativity or my originality because the ideas are still mine. And that's something I think that's important for like maybe your generation or even the younger generation who already have this right at their fingertips immediately and did not maybe experience just having even a computer in front, not having, sorry, they did not experience not having a computer in front of them, right?
Yes.
So for me, there was a time when I did not have a computer. It was all just literally writing things or using the typewriter, right? So
Yeah. You keep getting to my points before I do. This is crazy. So the next question was how would it affect workflows in schools? But you talked about what I've heard like all the other adults that I've interviewed talk about.
yeah,
There's this theme that when they use it, they see it as a tool because all of their essential skills are already developed from their time in school. But since my project is mostly based on a generative AI in an academic setting, mostly pertaining to high schoolers and people
hmm,
around my age, we
yeah,
haven't developed those skills yet, or as foundationally as your generation have. So
yeah.
that's why I am like, especially since you're a teacher, how do you think it would affect workflows in schools? And also, you reminded me. So, well, you were teaching us, we still had our computers and everything because it was the COVID time.
Yeah.
Now we actually have our computers for less things because of AI. There's like a huge wave of AI and then there's huge pushback. Like we don't write
Yeah.
on them anymore. We have to write all our essays by hand now.
Wow, really?
Or
Wow.
most of the essays, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, how should I say this? The first part was how does it impact workflows,
Yeah.
right? So it drastically changes that. And I think that's what we're trying to wrap our minds around now in various industries, right? So what does this really look like when we're using it effectively, efficiently, and ethically, right? So every institution, every school, every hospital, every corporation is figuring that out right now. And so I think we're kind of in pilot test mode, right, if you will, in the next 5 years. Even if it's 5 years, it's still this generation where we're trying to figure out how would this look, what would this look like in terms of academic integrity, right? So now, okay, and I think it's an what's the word I'm looking for? Overcorrection, right? So now, for example, there's AI. Everybody was using their computer, and then suddenly it's like, oh, it can be used for cheating, right? And basically, they can ask it to write their own email. And there was an urgent need to stop that, but we did not necessarily, even as educators, for instance, know how to stop that, but also still kind of use AI. So there's an overcorrection by saying, okay, we're just going to not use AI and computers altogether until we figure this out. And the hope is that the until we figure this out, that people are actually thinking of practices around it. So now it's like, okay, let's go back to paper because that's the quote unquote safest way, right? But really, is that shortchanging, right? The learning experience of individuals who have access to such a powerful tool, right? That can even produce more knowledge if used correctly and ethically. So I think there's an opportunity here to, okay, now we're level setting, right? Okay, we're probably going back to paper, but there has to be an effort to think about that among educators and among leaders about rather than taking it away, really understanding how what it means to ethically, appropriately, and honestly use the tool, and then to include that in the training of the students, right? It's another critical thinking is one skill set, right? Using technology is another skill set. And instead of being afraid of it, right, we have to understand it, understand its parameters, and then build policy around it. So yeah, that's my take on it. I wouldn't say I'm disappointed that people have this knee-jerk reaction of taking it away because I see the power of the tool, right? But it's now I think is the chance for us to say, no, it is something good, right? But we have to understand how to behave around it, right? So a stove, for instance, I'm in my kitchen, so I'm seeing my stove here, right? So we use fire and gas, right? Fire and gas, that's dangerous, right? But we keep them here in our house because we know it's an important, empowering tool. It helps feed us,
A good
right?
metaphor.
Right, because I'm in my kitchen, so I actually saw it. Right. So there are things that are we ride cars knowing the danger of the cars, but we wear seatbelts, right? So I think we are just in general putting fear ahead of us, right? We're using that fear to sort of say, okay, we're not going to deal with this. But I think the very prudent approach would be to understand it, which I think educators are. They're trying their best. Um, and I hope we get to a point where we develop norms around its use and just recognize that this is a powerful tool that can, like, can you imagine high school students being able to sleep earlier, just, and be healthier, right? When it comes to balancing their time and managing their time, if they know how to use that tool well, right? If, for example, like Vivian draws up an outline of the paper and bullet points, right? Would it be unethical for you to put that into Chat GPT and say, can you please, polish this and make it into like 5 paragraphs? I personally, and again, this is just me, right? I personally don't think that that is a violation of academic integrity because all the ideas that you fed into that are yours, right? And the tool is just helping you generate the formatting of this that makes sense based on your ideas. And then the next step is to take that first draft and then edit it yourself, right? So again, it's just teaching us how to use the tool rather than saying it's not a good thing.
Yeah. So back to the stovetop analogy, it's how calculators were normalized. There were a bunch of studies in the UK and Japan
Yeah,
to
yeah,
basically weigh the pros and cons, and they ultimately decided that the pros outweigh the cons, and therefore it was normalized as a tool in school. And also, as a product of this project, I would like to do something like at my school or like used to be your school. So right now we're actually AI is being more included in our curriculum than I would say most public schools because it is not banned yet. And Miss
yeah,
Randig actually lets us do like scientific research with
right,
the search engine because scientific articles can be pretty hard to read. And for
right.
me, I do a lot of science projects that require like so much reading, so many articles, and I use that to help,
Yeah,
or else I'd be sleeping at 2 a.m. every
yeah, yeah,
day.
for sure.
And I
Hmm.
would like there to be like a training session for educators or like an AI ethics class for students to teach them how to use it. But it's
Hmm.
a work in progress because I need something to back it up, which is why you're here.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so that's an exciting project. So let me just back up a little bit. So right now there is no module or special class on AI and the ethics of do you not talk about it at like I don't know, community time or advisory or is there
There's been like casual conversations with teachers. It's been included in the academic honesty guideline, like no usage of AI for writing assignments, unless like specifically designated by your teacher for a research project and stuff like that.
okay.
Yeah.
So even, with an equity lens, AI is not just an efficient and a tool for efficiency, but it's also a tool for equity. And what I mean by that is there are students with English as a foreign language, as a secondary language, like so ESL learners, dyslexic learners, learners who are neurodiverse, right? That AI could be a powerful tool in their learning, right? So again, completely saying no AI at all, right, unless specified, means that you are not considering how the tool can benefit learners, right? Thinking of the framework of what you call universal design for learning, right? Again, because it's seen as the enemy, right? It's the immediate assumption is it's going to be used for cheating, which is completely valid, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to use it for that. But again, it's like putting the cart before the horse. Oh, everybody's going to cheat, right? So just to foolproof our whole system, let's just remove the tool that can be a channel for cheating, right? But then when you're doing that, you're number one, preventing your students from developing their own sense of integrity, right, around that the use of that tool. Like, and so is that really what you want, right? Do you really want individuals to see um, AI as this bad tool and then eventually when they graduate when they use it they feel that guilt of like, oh, I'm using something that's like forbidden and it's not ethical to use AI per se, right? But that's not the world that we live in today, right? It's something that it's here. So if it's here we have to create policies and norms and parameters around using it, right? That's the one thing, right? You're basically trying to leverage the tool to maximize your learning experience. And then second is, you know, banning it, right? Or saying that you can't use it unless specified disadvantages the learners who now might have had this tool to help them learn better, right? So in terms of even learning support, AI can be leveraged for developing learning plans. That would not necessarily depend on one or two learning specialists at Forest Ridge. Right? We have learning specialists, but there are a lot of kids that they have to work with. So even in terms of efficiency in creating those plans and what those plans look like, accessibility, accommodations, right? AI can be leveraged for that. So um, like returning to your question again, could you remind me? Because I lost my train of thought in terms of the class. Was it the classes, right? You want to design classes around it?
Yes, I think, yeah.
Yes. So now there is a policy. I think it's so much needed, right? To have if not a standalone class, a curriculum, right, with different modules around AI. Like what is AI? What is it? What does generative AI mean versus other forms of AI, right? Because generative is the one that we're usually familiar with, but AI has been used by you know, software technology corporations for decades, really, right? And in different shapes and forms. Grammarly is AI, right? Our apps use AI. Voice recognition is AI, right? So there's this understanding that AI is bad, but we've been actually using it in different shapes and forms. And so there has to be an understanding of that. And then you have a module on the benefits or practical uses of it, maybe even peer-reviewed research on its benefits, etc. And then maybe a module on norm setting or collective norm setting about use, right? So I think it's worth proposing, starting with a proposed program or education program or curriculum. And I would say that, not in the grand like curriculum sense, but really a learning program around what you think people need to know about AI as a concept, like conceptually, and then what they need to know about using AI, right? Responsibly. So it's using it on a technical sense and then using it in an ethical sense as well. And then maybe you can even come up, and that's for students, right? In general, you can even come up with, again, for, as you said, teachers and staff, right? And this is where you can probably consult, again, teachers like myself, or even I would say curriculum designers, right? So in higher education, for instance, it's not really the professors that sometimes even design courses on Canvas or online, right? They have instructional designers who are well versed in universal design for learning and curriculum development that work with the professors to do that. So since this involves learning about a tool, a teaching tool, like I would even consult instructional designers who do stuff like this, right? Who create guidelines for teaching using AI. And if you're familiar, I think UW has even a website
Yeah.
for like curriculum design or something like that.
Oh,
And you can Google curriculum design
yes.
um, around AI.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, that would be a great project, right? Because it's something Forest Ridge
Yeah.
can take, right? And then implement. Yeah.
Yeah. So, moving on to the next question. As a
Mhm.
teacher, how would you evaluate work that has been generated by AI? Like, does does it matter how much involvement you have with the AI? Because some people argue that if you used AI, it belongs to the AI. Some,
Mm.
not AI, but the databases that it pulled from, some people say that our brain is like a database that we pull from, and
Mhm.
it's all your work, no matter what, no matter the degree of customization. And some people argue that it's more nuanced.
Yeah, I think it's more nuanced, right? Like again, just because you're using generative AI doesn't mean that it's not your idea, right? And I think that's my baseline, right? So if I were a teacher evaluating it, I would build my course, my pedagogy, right, around AI as a tool. So if, for example, I would go back to my learning outcomes, right, and my and every course you can ask every teacher at Forest Ridge, right? You have to when you propose a course, you have to propose learning outcomes,
Yes.
whether that be in terms of skills and competencies, right, or state standards, for instance. So if it's critical thinking, communication, let's take those two. So I want at the end of this course, my students should know how to do critical thinking, and they should know how to communicate in terms of writing. So those are my two goals in terms of my learning outcomes and competencies. And so if I'm, for example, um, wanting to assign an essay, right? I would make sure that my essay is an avenue for them to build critical thinking and communication. Now, how would I have to imagine, like, how would I design an assignment that would bring that out, but also leave room for them to engage with AI to enhance that experience? So I would first, right, because I'm trying to teach critical thinking and communication, let them ideate that on their own, right? Not using the tool. So making sure that the idea comes from them. And that could look like just them jotting things down on paper, exchanging ideas in a group, for instance, and then jotting it down. So really generating ideas from their own minds, right? And then writing that down. And then that would be like stage one, right, of the project, right? You kind of have to get that feedback loop. So there's a stage where they engage with the material and the assignment on their own without the help of tools of like AI. And then me as a teacher looking at that and providing feedback, right? So there's an iteration of, okay, this is your original work and providing feedback. And then I would necessarily integrate the use of AI in the process. I would even say, okay, now I want you to write this in paragraph form, right? But I want you to use a word processing document like Word, right?
Mhm.
So write that in prose form. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? And then stage three, I would even, in terms of critical thinking, right, include how do they engage with AI in this, right? And it's not great, it's formative, right? So, and communication would be their developing their editing skills, developing how, and part of that is using AI. Because again, AI generates something, and you have to interact with that result. And so when you interact with that result, now I'm saying, okay, now based on that result, copy and paste, right? Edit, right? And edit on your
Yeah.
own because I'm trying to measure that because if ultimately you have to, as a teacher, understand what it is you're trying to measure, right? And that is not just a grade like, oh, this looks great, I give you 100, right? But it's really, what am I measuring here? And that's why we have rubrics, right? That's why we have to understand, if I'm measuring critical thinking, a 4 or a 5 would look like this, right? And so I think it's a process, right? In terms of the how would I grade? It's not pretty straight up like, oh, I won't let them use AI and I'm just going to give them a grade based on this rubric. I think it's more of, I would assess the work by making sure that I'm measuring the outcomes that I'm looking for in terms of learning outcomes, and then integrating AI into the whole process, the whole learning process, so that it's not me trying to say, trying to prevent them from using the tool and creating a gotcha moment like, oh, you cheated because you used AI, right? But it's really, I think, cultivating a culture where you welcome tools that can enhance your learning experience and you learn how to work with it with integrity. I think that's for me a learning outcome too that I would even put, in terms of my
And for
course.
me as a student, I think actually breaking it down step by step than
Yeah.
just like doing the whole essay or one assignment. Well, actually, at our school, we do break it down, but sometimes you do it as one assignment, and that leads to a lot of conclusion. It actually helps students understand better. And
Yeah. Yeah.
really quick last question, because Zoom only gives me 40 minutes and I
Oh
refuse
no.
to pay. When do you think is a good age to start including AI? Like just using it in an
Ooh,
academic sense?
I would say middle school, right? The moment you ask kids to write um long essays or an analytical essays
So
or
like
um,
seventh, eighth grade?
I think, yeah, even sixth, middle
Sixth
school,
grade?
sixth, seventh, eighth, right? I think that's a good time to introduce that there is a, because they use computers, right? They
Yes.
use it to type. They will be exposed to that.
Mm,
And if, as a teacher, you're requiring them now to produce written work, lab reports, etc., that involve analysis and critical thinking, they will necessarily hear about this tool from their contemporaries and then engage with that. And if you don't engage with them in conversation about the ethical use of this, then you're not catching them at that time where they're trying to figure out how to use it. Right. So I think the earlier the better in terms of exposure, but in terms of integrating it into the curriculum, I think middle school is a sweet spot.
mm,
I have a fourth grader now, for instance, who still writes essays by hand. I don't think the teacher requires them to type it
yeah.
out, but sometimes they do in class. But it's not, the assignments are not generative in that they have to analyze a particular like
Yeah,
book, for instance. They have summaries, they answer questions. So I think in middle school, because the nature of the work now in terms of learning outcomes is around critical thinking, long prose writing, analyzing history. So you want to catch these students at a time where they feel the need to engage with these tools and need guidance to do that. Mhm.
that's a good answer. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And